Good evening and welcome to this evening's STS-88 mission status briefing. With us here to discuss the events of Endeavour spacewalking astronauts this evening, we have Bob Castle, the STS-88 lead flight director, and joining him this evening, Scott Blysath, the STS-88 lead EVA officer, and Greg Harbaugh, the manager of the EVA projects office here at Johnson Space Center. We'll have statements from all three of these gentlemen, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. Bob?
Okay. Well, good evening. I'm very happy to be here. We're coming to the close of the assembly part of the STS-88 mission. It was the first of the assembly missions, U.S. assembly missions, and I'm very, very gratified to be able to say that essentially all of the assembly tasks are done. There's still a few more things to do in this mission, and the mission itself certainly isn't over. But as far as putting together the first elements of the International Space Station, we're pretty close to done. Today was highlighted, of course, by EVA number 3, and I'll let Scott talk about the details of EVA number 3. Suffice it to say that everything we set out to do, we got done in that EVA, which puts us, again, with all our tasks that we'd aim to do done. We had a very long list or prioritized list of tasks to do on this mission. Several of them were listed as things that we might not get done. Don't count on them for future flights. And Bill Bastuto and I went through them this afternoon, and we've done them all. Everything on the list has been picked up. So it's been very successful. I'm extremely happy about it all. I'll let Scott talk about the EVA today. A few more things going on today. We're doing a final survey using the RMS system, as well as the cameras inside the cabin, just to completely document exactly how we're leaving Zarya and Unity when we undock tomorrow. The crew did a lot of EVA photography to try and document it, so that's the last little bits that we're picking up today. We're also, just as I was leaving, we're about to depress the vestibule, which is the volume in between the shuttle and Zarya, or shuttle and Unity, excuse me, PMA-2, which will set us up for undocking tomorrow. Just a few words on the undocking. We've been working the details of that. The undocking window opens tomorrow at 2:24 p.m. local time. So that will be the planned nominal undocking time. We'll be undocking over Russian ground sites so that they can issue commands to the Zarya mission motion control system and reactivate that. That will be going active about 2 orbits later. We'll get our first pictures of the undocking shortly after undocking. We'll get live TV about 4 minutes later. The sun doesn't rise until 2:37 local time tomorrow. But then we'll pick up with it. We'll separate on out to 450 feet. We'll do a fly around. We'll go around 1.5 times is what we've settled on doing. The first circle all the way around will be in complete sunlight. We'll get a very good documentation, see exactly how we're leaving the space station. The station itself will remain in free drift while we do the fly around. We will then do another half a circle around, and that's really just to set us up with the right geometry and the right timing to do a star tracker test that we've been trying to get done. So we'll fit in this little test after we separate. But that's really the only reason we're doing it. It's going to be dark. We won't get a lot more photography. That's the basics of tomorrow, and then we start preparation essentially for landing. We have 2 secondary payloads to deploy. One, the SAC-A, will be deployed tomorrow afternoon, and then the MightySat payload will be deployed the day after that, which will be the day before entry, which would be, and then we're still looking good for a landing, and you probably know the landing times as well as I do, landing I hope on Tuesday. So at that, I'll pass on to Scott, who will talk about the EVA that folks want to hear about.
Okay, well, thank you, Bob. Well, we're very pleased with another successful spacewalk, successful EVA today. Today's EVA, we were able to accomplish our primary planned objectives. In addition to that, we also completed a couple unscheduled tasks, some contingency tasks. The main purpose for today's spacewalk was to prepare the exterior of the space station for future missions, for future spacewalks. We delivered a large tool bag and installed that, strapped it down to the top of the Unity module. This bag contained a couple dozen different spacewalking tools that will be available for future crews. We also disconnected some electrical cables that connected PMA-2 to the front end of Unity. By disconnecting these cables, this allows PMA-2 to be disconnected and reattached to another location on Unity on an upcoming mission. We also installed a handrail at the top of Zarya, which completes the translation path that will lead crews from Zarya to the future service module. And then we also stowed and positioned our foot restraints and prepared them and got them positioned for the next mission, which is Assembly Mission 2A.1. In addition to these planned activities, we also accomplished a couple of contingency tasks. The first being the deployment of the Zenith Zarya Toru antenna. This is on the back side of Zarya. On EVA-2, we deployed the front side of the nadir antenna, and very much in the same fashion that we assisted the deployment on the second EVA, the crew today, with Jerry Ross positioned at the end of the robot arm and a foot restraint, was able to utilize the Russian pole or boat hook to lift up the antenna to deploy it. The antenna today required a little bit more poking and prodding than a couple days ago, but just as we saw then, the antenna eventually did deploy successfully. In addition, when the crew was positioned at the top of the Zarya module to install the handrail, they also performed an inspection. And during that inspection, they noticed a science panel which contains some experiments, some material samples, was out of configuration, was just partially opened or deployed. And so we provided some instructions for them to secure that in its proper configuration. And just like with the activities a couple days ago during EVA-2, the success of these two contingency tasks was very much dependent on the careful coordination that we had with our Russian partners. And so we were able to discuss what needed to be done for those and implement those correctly. At the finish of the EVA, we also performed a demonstration of the emergency backpack system called SAFER, or Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. This is a device that the astronauts will wear on all of their space station excursions, spacewalks. And what we did was we had Jerry Ross perform some simple maneuvers in the payload bay, remaining tethered. He performed some simple translations, moving forward and back and side to side, and also used the automatic attitude hold feature to see if how effective that capability is in stopping a rotating or tumbling crew member, and testing that in different rotations such as pitch, roll, and yaw. We also demonstrated the deployment of the hand controller. This hand controller is stowed, you can't even see it during an EVA, it's stowed inside a small compartment at the bottom of the backpack, and then the crew lifts up a lever to rotate this hand controller out to be able to unstow it and use it to fly safer. So all these capabilities were successfully demonstrated. So that wraps up our 3 EVAs for the mission. This is clearly a very exciting time for our spacewalk team here in Houston and for all of those who have worked in preparing this first assembly mission. Greg?
Thanks, Scott. About the only thing I have to add to that is I think this is further ample evidence that the EVA team, the EVA project, the EVA program is up to the challenge. We have set in place the third brick in the EVA wall and done it with a flourish. We have gone above and beyond the call of duty for the third time, demonstrating that we knew how to plan for, train for, and execute EVAs that are demanded of the EVA team by the Space Station Assembly program. So I think this is a great start. We obviously have an awfully long way to go, and we are learning things as we go along. And the challenge for us for the longer term will be to carry the lessons learned forward and improve the processes as we go along. But so far so good, and we're just delighted with the results of STS-88.
Okay, we'll open up to questions here. Martin.
Martin Berkey with the Huntsville Times, I guess, for Greg or Scott, either one. What are, just sort of the top of your mind, what are some lessons learned or some questions asked that you want to carry into the post-flight studies of the EVAs?
Well, we're going to ask them, how their experience on orbit compared to their experience here on the ground in their training facilities, namely the neutral buoyancy lab. We spent a lot of time modeling the equipment that they deal with and the work sites where the tasks take place. So we want to get an understanding of how that experience on orbit compared to their training experience. We'll also talk to them about the tools that they used to see if they have any insight on any improvements that may need to be made, and then also on our procedures. Did they learn any new techniques that perhaps we need to pass on to future crews?
Okay. Just out of curiosity, I guess, for Mr. Castle, is there anything you can do about the radio problem over South America? The salsa music or whatever that they get every go round?
We've tried. No, not that I'm aware of. We have limited control over a lot of things in other countries. I understand it was a horse race today. People thought it was some sort of a sporting event or soccer game, I think, the other day. No, we know what it is. There's not much we can do about it. We have several places in the world that they don't abide by the FCC or international rules on frequency allocations, and there's not much we can do about it. Try to avoid them.
Pauline Arriaga, AP for Bob Castle. Can this mission now be deemed a success, or do you need to wait just a little bit longer until they do undock with the station? And once they do, how big of a relief or celebration will it be for you all?
Well, I'd like to wait a little bit longer until we undock. Once we undock, I'm going to declare the assembly part of this mission a success. No shuttle mission is ever completely a success until it lands. So I'm not going to really celebrate until we land at the Kennedy Space Center. But it's going to be a big relief, I think, for a lot of people. And I'm probably one of the minor ones. I've worked very, very hard and very, very long on this flight for about 2 years. There are people who have got me beat by a long shot. There are people with 10 years working on the station program easily around here. So, but it's going to be a tremendous relief when we undock, because that will be the completion of the assembly part of the mission. And undocking is probably one of the easier things that we do. So I think that's one of the easier ones left in front of us. But the mission will really be a complete success when we land.
Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Mr. Harbaugh. Could you give us an idea, a sort of look ahead at the spacewalk on 2A.1, what exactly will be taking place during that EVA? And I was also wondering, there's 4 shuttle missions next year, and I'm wondering if you know how many spacewalks will be conducted during the course of those 4 station assembly missions next year, and whether or not there are any particular EVAs in that bunch that you think are particularly challenging.
Well, you caught me without my reference notes, Todd, as far as the upcoming details of the upcoming EVAs. I think in general, if I can characterize it this way, I'm concerned about the pieces coming together, and that the interfaces work where they need to, and I've been in the past, when I characterize a particular EVA as more or less difficult than another, I'm always at some risk, because you have to understand the context of any EVA as being one that is very, very demanding physically and emotionally and mentally on the crew members that are doing the work. So there are no easy EVAs coming up, and yet they are all EVAs that we think we can accommodate in the course of events. The training is going on. The definition for 2A.1 and for 2A.2 and for 3A is an ongoing process. And because we've added and shifted the priorities a little bit, I think the definition of those EVAs is still in work. So I'd rather defer that detailed question.
And just a quick follow, and I'm not sure if this is for you or Bob. If for some reason the shuttle can't get loose of the stack tomorrow, what's the drill?
No. We use the normal undocking system, which is the same as we've used on Mir. There are redundant motors and redundant mechanisms to undock. If that doesn't work, we have a pyro system that will release the hooks. Only the shuttle side of the hooks have been closed. And if that doesn't work, we have yet another EVA task in front of us that can be called upon. But I have very great confidence we're not going to need that.
Mark?
Thanks. Mark Harrow from the Houston Chronicle. There was a portion of the spacewalk where you were looking at some paint on the outside of the modules. It seemed to be just confined to the targets or something for the space vision system. Could you sort of explain what that is, if it's some problem beyond that, or is it just a small issue that you're looking at, or not an issue at all?
It's a small problem that we're looking at. Some of the targets, on the space vision system targets, the paint on them is kind of bubbling. It's not completely flat. And I don't know that people fully understand it yet. I don't think it's a big problem. I think there are a lot of targets. I think a few of them having little bubbles in them is not going to be a big deal. But we want to understand it because we're using those same kind of targets on future modules, of course, that haven't launched yet. And if we need to make any changes, we need to go figure out what they are.
And are these just the dots? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, just the dots.
And those, I guess, are applied to the module. They're not like painted into the surface of the module. Are they somewhat mobile? I'm just not sure exactly.
They're mobile. Almost all of them are on their own little panels, and then the panels are mounted on the modules. It's rare that we do anything other than that. So yes, those can be changed fairly readily on the modules that haven't launched yet, of course.
Okay. Todd with a follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow. Todd Halverson, Florida Today. Bob, on the EVA that would be done if you were not able to undock, and I realize this is several failures to get there. Is that the old 96-bolt EVA that would have been done on Mir?
Yes, it is. Exactly the same.
Okay. Martin?
I don't know if this would be for Greg or for Scott. Some of the views you saw there, it looked almost like a hedgerow there with cables floating out and around like that. I'm just wondering, is it going to get more difficult to translate over the station as this goes on, to kind of, so the astronauts kind of keep out of the way of cables and experiments and things they might break as they go on?
Well, one of the plans for tonight's activities was to secure those cables, and that's what we did. So we put a lot of time and planning into making sure that those cables do not impact or impede those translation routes so that they can be used by future crews.
Okay. Todd, you get the last follow-up.
Okay. We were unable to see the SAFER evaluation because the KU band was in blockage. I was just wondering if you guys could tell from what you were seeing on the ground whether that unit was operating the way you expected it to?
Well, let me take a stab at that. I think the answer to that is there were some things that we didn't anticipate. It seemed to use the propellant a lot more quickly than it had done in the simulations, and I don't know that we, at this point, really understand whether that was a true indication of the consumption of the gas or whether it was an erratic pressure transducer or something else. There was some discussion on the air-to-ground about cross-coupling, in other words, getting uncommanded motion in axes that wasn't necessarily desired, but it's not clear yet until we look at the video and study it whether or not that was something that is anticipated, because a certain amount of that cross-coupling can be anticipated. So we have to go do some homework and some study there before we can declare this a complete victory in the sense that the SAFER worked perfectly, but clearly it was worth doing. It was a valid test, and that it's always important to demonstrate the parachute, and that's why I pushed so hard to have this test done. We may find that we want to do some more testing on orbit as a result of this, but it's all in the intent of getting us to a point where we can feel very comfortable and know that this SAFER unit is going to be there for us when we need it.
And just to quick follow. I couldn't tell whether it appeared as if the automatic attitude hold was working, whether that would actually be good enough to stop a tumbling spacewalker. Were you able to tell?
Hard to make that determination without seeing the video. It sounded, from what I picked up, like it worked pretty well, but there was a slow rotation off in one axis. But I'm inferring that without really seeing the video, as you haven't seen the video, I haven't seen the video, and looking at some data. So we'll just have to look at it.
Okay, we got some information fed back to us on a question that came up earlier in terms of the number of spacewalks planned on the station flights for next year. That's 10 spacewalks planned over the 4 station flights in 1999, 1 on STS-96, 2 on STS-101, which is the 2A.2 flight, 4 on STS-92, and 3 on STS-97. And with that, we will conclude this briefing and resume mission coverage momentarily. Thank you very much.